2, 1.
Here we go!
Welcome back to Big Friendly Sports with Jon Hamm. We're 10 games into the NBA season. The Thunder just concluded a short road trip to Sacramento and Phoenix. So we're going to talk about that and talk about the Thunder season. Small takeaways, big takeaways, lots to talk about right now. Before we get started here, I want to give thanks to our sponsors as usual. MidFirst Bank, Laser Light Skin Clinic, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, Fire Lake Casino, and your Oklahoma Ford dealers. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. So our guest today is Jacob Kniffen, who is part of the Uncontested Podcast. Jacob and I have known each other for quite a while. Every once in a while, we get a wild hair and say, we need to do a show or a pod together. So it is happening again. So you can get the Uncontested Pods throughout the week after every game. And you can find Jacob on Twitter at Jacob Kniffen. Jacob, how's it going today, sir?
It is going great, Ham. Thanks so much for having me on. I super appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. And, this is a good time of year right now. I say that, and then people start getting like flummoxed when the Thunder have the audacity to lose a game or two. But let's go back and talk about this road trip a little bit. So go back to Sacramento, and that's a game that, we talk about learning experiences once in a while for this team, and we always wonder, okay, sure, but did they learn anything? It sure felt like coming out of Sacramento, they learned a thing or two going into Phoenix last night, didn't it?
For sure. And I think people tend to forget how young this team is. There's a rookie in the starting lineup who just played his, 10th, 11th game, second-year guy, a third-year guy. And then you got the vets who are both 25 or younger in that starting line. They're so young that Sacramento game, they were flat. They didn't play very physically. And yeah, they've done a great job of coming out after losses this year and really responding well. I felt like they did that in Phoenix last night. A much more physical game all around. And it feels like they took something away from just that incredibly slow start in Sacramento. Thunder started off incredibly quick in Phoenix, got up early, did lose the lead, got it back there at the end, obviously. But it's like the coaching staff always says, and it's so cliche, but it's so true. You just got to stack these good days. You got to build these habits, and those come one day at a time. You're not going to make these jumps and these leaps. It's piece by piece, bite by bite.
And despite being 6-4 this season, the Thunder will head into tomorrow night's game 0-0 because that's what they preach.
100%. 100%.
But you go back to last night, and as far as physicality goes, Sacramento brought it. They were hustling. They were throwing their bodies around. Sabonis was just wrecking them inside. And there was a different kind of wreckage in Phoenix, but it was something that, OKC was able to sustain very well. And, then OKC's defense engages in the fourth quarter. Just talk about when you're watching that game, just sort of what you're going through, because there was a moment where I thought this could flip. And I didn't realize it until afterwards that Phoenix had completely collapsed for the last 9 minutes of the game.
Yeah, I didn't realize it in the moment how few points they scored in that fourth quarter. But the Thunder defense was on point the entire game. Early there in the first quarter, we had that Lou Dort steal on a Kevin Durant entry pass 30 feet from the hoop and a run out and a dunk. They were very engaged early. I think the Suns shot around like 40% on the night. The things that stick out are the things that the sore thumb that you were looking for, like the offensive rebounding. But even when you see the rebounding numbers, Phoenix only outscored the Thunder in second chance points. I think it was like 9-3, like a very marginal difference. Phoenix had 17, 18 turnovers. The Thunder using that length, that athleticism, that speed to play the passing lanes. The defense engaged from the word go. And I thought from a physicality standpoint, Jalen Williams, J-Dub in particular, had it going from all three levels offensively. But it wasn't just the scoring. It was how he was doing it, getting downhill and just big bodying guys out of the way, using his physicality to guard Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant. Like his response specifically, I thought kind of set the tone for the entire team on how they went throughout that Phoenix game. And like you said, that fourth quarter, they locked in. And I thought, especially the fourth quarter, Chet Holmgren and his defense really shine. Anytime a Phoenix player would get within 10 feet of the basket, it was a quick U-turn and go the other way, because just that rim presence that he provides, that paint presence that he provides, they locked in. And if they can continue to do that, the offensive rebounds are still going to happen. It's just a product of this team. But the tenacity defensively, if they can sustain that, they're going to be a really good basketball team.
Oh, and by the way, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was pretty awesome last night too. Which,
just
aside from the Denver
30
game
piece.
this season, has been pretty standard.
Oh yeah, doing that without the free throw attempts too. I mean, when you look at the season average, Shea is down about 45% on free throw attempts per game compared to last season. Did get up to 8 free throw attempts last night, but John didn't go to the free throw line for his second time until 4:32 left in the fourth quarter. Not getting the whistle nearly as much, and so he's finding other ways to be effective. Another guy very engaged defensively, and poor Phoenix just had absolutely no answer for Shea. When he's got that midi pull up going, you're going to have a long night. You step out to guard that, he gets to the rim. You stay off of it. You go under the screen. The pull-up is there every time. He about made Bradley Beal trip over his own feet at one point on a little push crossover. That the leap he's made is just phenomenal. It's fun to watch. It is fun to watch.
Yeah, that it is. And it's going to be constant adjustments because, I mean, Shea talked about earlier this season that, the refs are calling things differently. They're letting a lot of things go. And like you mentioned, the Thunder as a team are not getting to the free throw line on those drives like they were last season. They're down a few attempts per game compared to last season. I noticed that like Lou Dort is not drawing those offensive fouls when he's, part of a pick and roll like he was getting in the past. It feels like the game's being called a little bit differently. And, again, I think the Thunder, they're going to figure out where to find some advantages right now. But it feels like a lot of the tools from the tool bag last year were taken from the job site.
Definitely. You look at Jalen Williams from Arkansas, J-Will. No charges on the season yet.
Yeah.
He did miss some time due to injury, but you'd expect by this time there to be 10 or 15 charges in the bag already, the way he draws them. None so far. And part of that is the officiating. Part of that is the memo was out on the guy, and teams now have a full season of data to look at and to adjust to. So he will have to adjust the way he defends. But yeah, lots are changing. I wonder, in a sense, Ham, we've seen the NBA come in and be very hardcore about certain new officiating rules. And it lasts a little after Thanksgiving, maybe till Christmas, and then we always settle back down. They start high, and it levels back off. We saw this with the Thunder last season. They weren't getting very many foul calls. I forget which game it was, but Mark Daigneault went in that post-game press conference with all that data and started laying down, this is what we're doing. We're not getting these calls. This is the calls the other teams are getting. Here's the percentages. And Lord behold, if not the next night, Shea starts getting the whistle more. It's just going to take time. Everything, I think, will balance out. The NBA has these tendencies to ebb and flow a little bit, but at the end of the day, we always kind of level out. So I would expect the free throws and the offensive fouls the Thunder draw so well to come back to the surface probably sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's the annual points of emphasis that they put out. There was one year where there was a zero tolerance policy towards griping at the officials, and there was a lot of technical fouls in the month of November, and then it settled back down. They've had it for, oh my gosh, I forget the other things, but every once in a while they have.
There was a delay of game one.
Delay of game, that's right. Yes, that was the other one that they started issuing delay of game and technical fouls early on, and people were like, "You're delaying the game even more by doing all this. Okay, what are you really accomplishing here?" And so, yeah, some of this is like early season stuff that they're trying to set a tone, and then once we kind of get past that, I'll be really curious to see, what we're talking about in the month of December and into January. And maybe if some of these trends are picking back up again, is that something you're kind of expecting?
Yeah, I think it will even out eventually. not really as much of an NBA thing as just a human nature thing, right?
Sure.
You try to go against the grain, and eventually you fall back into what you're comfortable with. So, but hey, to this point, 10 games in, the Thunder have adjusted pretty well. 6-4 is the best start they've had in 4 years, 5 years, something like that. So they are definitely
2018.
Yeah, settling in and adjusting how they've needed to. And even though they're not getting the offensive fouls, they're finding ways to turn over teams in other ways and finding ways to be effective defensively.
So looking up ahead, the next game is the next game of the in-season tournament against San Antonio. Before we talk about that game specifically, now that we got a couple of games under our belts, not only with OKC, but just across the league, has your opinion changed much at all in terms of the in-season tournament, how you feel about it? And do the courts get you fired up now? Is there anything that makes you feel any differently than coming into the season?
I will say 90% of the courts I'm into. I think they look really cool.
They look kind of sharp.
Yeah. Some of them are god-awful. God bless those teams. But most of them look really cool. The energy has been good. Now, the Thunder are 0-2, and so that's not fun. So maybe next year, but this was going to be a thing that was going to take some time anyways. I'm not surprised that a lot of people aren't super bought into the in-season tournament in year one, but give it 3-4 years, especially after we see the Final Four go to Vegas and see what that looks like. I think that will be pretty cool. And I mean, it's not a bad payday for anybody. So give it some time. I think it's just like anything else. It's going to take time for people to get used to it. But I think eventually it's going to be a really, really cool feature of the NBA season. I just think it's so new right now. And the only thing that looks different with the on-court production is the court itself. So there's nothing to really get excited about. But I think once we get to the Final Four in Vegas, I think people will buy in a lot more. And I think you'll see teams buy in a lot more.
And I think fans probably just need to go through this for a year or so just to kind of understand how it works. I can't tell you. Yeah. I had so many people that after the Warriors game were like, see, the NBA wanted the Warriors to advance. And then it's like, that's not how this works. It's called group play. It's you'll get it next year, right?
Yeah.
I think there's some people that they can read on paper about the different groups and how it works and some of the tiebreakers and whatnot. But I think once they kind of go through it for one season, I think next year it'd be maybe a little more natural for them. And I think that's a good point about the Final Four in Vegas. I think that could be an atmosphere that fans start going, oh, okay, I would like to be part of that even if I'm not there. I would like to celebrate that thing, so I want my team to be in this next year.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yep, makes a lot of sense. So San Antonio tomorrow night, which not only an in-season tournament game, it is the first regular season matchup between Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. We got a taste of that in the first preseason game, and that was a lot of fun for the one half of basketball. They were on the floor, Jacob. And, you look at the Spurs coming in, and Thunder Spurs was a really good, I call it a rivalry. It was more like two teams that highly respected each other. It was almost like OU Nebraska, I think, back in the day. It was kind of like the Thunder and Spurs. But, I think there's some hope or maybe an idea that that's going to become a thing again, given what OKC is building and what San Antonio can do. But there's more than just Chet and Wemby. I want to talk about them, here in a minute. But what else do you see? What else should people be looking for if they're just sort of, not aware of some of the finer workings between the two teams tomorrow night?
For sure. Well, I would assume that a lot of Thunder fans did not, or people who absorb Thunder basketball did not watch that first preseason game. Preseason basketball is reserved for the degenerates like you and I, Ham. I'm not sure how many people are tuning in. But one interesting thing from that game was Chet and Wemby didn't guard each other. It was J-Dub who guarded Victor Wembanyama. Chet guarded Zach Collins. So I think that's an interesting little wrinkle that's going to be fun to watch Tuesday night. We didn't get to see Jeremy Sohan whenever the Spurs came to Oklahoma City for that first preseason game. A big physical guy who probably should play the 4 in the league, but is playing point guard for San Antonio, which I think is awesome. That's an interesting little wrinkle. Devin Vassell of the San Antonio Spurs, has battled some injuries this season, but I think he's one of the most unsung guys in the NBA. He's incredible. Really, really good player. The Spurs like to space the floor out. The Spurs have played really good, but they have these crazy swings of games. They'll go up 20 and then lose, or they'll like that infamous Phoenix game where the Victor Wembanyama welcome to the league game when the Spurs were down 20 and came back and won. I think just the other night they had like a 19-point lead and ended up losing to the Miami Heat. They have these crazy swings back and forth, and it's going to be interesting to see, does that trend continue tomorrow night in OKC? Because we've seen the Thunder have crazy swings as well. I go back to the second game of the season against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Thunder are up. They get down by 10, and then with the final 2 minutes, they come back and win it. And so I think it's going to be a highly entertaining game. Like you said, between two franchises that I do think respect each other, who are on a similar trajectory of we're young and we're still developing, but the sky is the limit. The sky is the absolute limit with the talent on both of these teams. I think the Thunder are further along. One team has an all-NBA player, the other does not. I think that's going to play a big role. But it's going to be really fun to see these two. I think a lot of people would say probably the two highest upside young teams in the NBA go head-to-head.
Yeah, and you touched upon it. Chet and Wemby were not matched up one-on-one, and I'm sure that's bound to happen on occasion depending on the lineups or if there's a switch or something. But one play, like you say, we're degenerates, so we watched that preseason game and we took a lot from it that probably doesn't mean a whole lot. But there was a play I remember where Charles Bassey was on the floor. He was the nominal center for San Antonio, and so Chet was guarding him. And there was a play where J-Dub is guarding Wembanyama, and he overcomes a double. I think it was Isaiah Joe. Could have been Shea. I can't remember exact. Well, yeah. Anyway, it was another Thunder player, who threw and then Wemby threw the pass to Bassey, and he's met at the rim by Chet. And so, it goes to show, like, if those matchups had been shifted, if the Thunder had a true big man, that matchup would have gone differently. But, that kind of gave a peek into the Thunder's thinking on, we don't necessarily want Chet drawn away from the rim. We want to make sure that he's there to intimidate other players. And this was in preseason game number 1. And we just talked about game number 10 versus Phoenix, where we saw that happen in action. It's developing. It's part of the plan. And so, yeah, it would be fun to have these two guys go mano a mano. Much like Hakeem versus Ewing or whatever, Shaq versus, he had no peer back in the day. But, point being, it would be fun to see that. But these teams are being designed a little bit differently, and you kind of get the reasons why.
Yeah, definitely. Now, even though they don't guard each other, I can very much foresee a time tomorrow night where Wemby comes down and hits a ridiculous 3, and Chet comes down and responds with a 3, and Wemby comes back down and gets a dunk, and I could see something like that happening. I'm super excited that this is also I believe it's a TNT game. I know it's nationally televised.
Yes.
I think it's a TNT game. Earlier tip in Oklahoma City, 6:30 instead of 7. But I feel like the NBA community as a whole has seen Victor play a lot, because when you land Victor Wembanyama in the draft, you get national TV games. I don't feel like a lot of the general NBA fandom across the country has got to see J-Dub and Shea and Cason Wallace and Chet Holmgren. And I know they've had one or two nationally televised games so far, but this feels like a chance for a coming out party, especially with those two, even though they won't guard each other for the entire game, going head to head. Just an awesome opportunity for the Thunder to announce themselves to fans across the globe.
So with that, I'm going to steal an idea from my Sellout Crowd cohort, Eli Letterman. We're going to play a little game here. And it's just for you, Jacob. It can't be used anywhere else unless you have a family member that comes on this show. We are calling it, are you Niff in or are you Niff out? See, I'm just so clever. And I'm such a thief by taking this from Eli, who does this with Gare and Emig. Are you Gare in or Gare out? And I'm like, well, I got Jacob coming on. I am stealing that concept completely. So Let's go through a few things here. Feel free to elaborate. Give me your temperature on this. As you mentioned, OKC has displayed a rebounding issue throughout this season. It has been more pronounced at times. In other cases, it's been contained. But what say you to the idea that they need to make a major trade to fix the rebounding? Are you niff in or you niff out on this?
A major trade to address the rebounding issue. I am very much niff out on this one. John, I don't know where to go with this one. Like fans, people who watch this team have been very upset with the rebounding. I've had people in my mentions saying they need to go trade for Karl Anthony Towns. Last night it was Kelly Olynyk, of all guys, that they needed to go trade for. How they solve the rebounding issue is you get your guys to go rebound the ball. Like, I look at Lou Dort in that Phoenix game in the fourth quarter. That man was everywhere, ripping rebounds from all over the floor. Part of it, yes, is a personnel decision. But like I said earlier, they forced 17 Phoenix turnovers. You don't get that if you go trade for a big lumbering center who can't do much else. The Thunder have a very specific way they want to play. And I think Sam Presti and Mark Daigneault would tell you the same thing. There's not some magic fix the rebound button that we can hit. This is something that these guys have to fight through. They have to learn. They have to do. And it's a learning process. And honestly, like as somebody who has taught people for a very long time, the best teacher is going through experience and you struggle. And through that struggle, you find your success. They are not. I would be floored if they made any trade this year, much less a trade to fix the rebounding problem.
So that kind of leads into the next one then. Okay, so we're not going to make a major trade to fix the rebounding or even a minor trade. And I've seen the minor trades out there, and I've seen some rather bad trades out there that we're not going to talk about. But how about this idea that with Shea showing what he's capable of and with all of the plentiful assets on the team, the Thunder need to go in and cash those in now to start winning? Are you niff in or you niff out on this idea?
I am 2 for 2 on the niff out so far, Ham. They do have a ton of assets. They have million trades they could go make. You don't know what you have yet. Like, you know what you have in Shea. But people saying, like, move Chet to the 4 and go trade for a center. You have a 10-game sample size of Chet at the 4. For people who live in Oklahoma, like, your life around this time of year revolves around college football. 10 games in an NBA season is the equivalent of like a game and a half in a college football season. You're not benching the quarterback and firing the defensive coordinator and redrawing up all the plays a game and a half into your non-conference schedule. You're not going to make drastic changes 10 games into an NBA season. The time will come to cash in the assets. And I personally think cashing in those assets looks more like trading up from pick 12 to pick 6 more than it does trading Josh Giddey and 5 firsts to go get Mikal Bridges. I could be totally wrong. I'm just some knucklehead that you decided to invite on a podcast, but I see trading up in the draft as their cash in the assets move more than going and getting an established star in the league.
All right. So Oklahoma City, renowned three-point shooting team that they are, of course, they are not. But this season, they are currently within the top 5 in three-point field goal percentage. Jacob, are you niff in or niff out on that sustaining for the entire season?
This is a difficult one because the shooting has been awesome, and I just went on a rant about how a 10-game sample size means absolutely nothing. I am going to go 3 for 3 on niff out here with the caveat that they're currently 4th in the league, 37.5%. I think they're going to end top 10. Not top 5, but top 10 would be a pretty substantial jump from last year where I think they were like in the late teens. And that's because Chet Holmgren can like legitimately shoot the ball. I think part of it is Lou Dort having a better shot diet and taking more open shots and not forcing as much. Shea is shooting the 3-ball more. He's up to like 4 attempts per game, 5 attempts per game. J-Dub has made a leap. Cason Wallace can shoot it. And we haven't even seen guys like Isaiah Joe is not shooting anywhere near what he shot last year yet. Davis Bertans in his cameos so far has not shot the ball well. I think when it's all said and done, they'll be top 10, but I'm going out on top 5.
I mean, I think that makes sense because, the guys that are shooting well right now are shooting unsustainably well. So you've got the guys here, and you've got a few of those guys. Like you mentioned, Shea is not shooting real well to start the season. I don't know where the mean is between those two, but, they're going to come to it. And it's still just, again, you look at it. And the Thunder had like a really hot shooting month and a half last season. It's something they're clearly capable of doing. But it was still just sort of, alarming to go sort by 3-point percentage and see the Thunder up towards the top after all these years. So,
yeah,
throw
you through a loop.
Yeah, it's something to keep an eye on. But man, if that sustains, that's wonderful. But not gonna bank on that. All right, so let's step into the next one then. Will OKC finish the season as a top 10 team in both offensive and defensive rating? Jacob, are you niff in or niff out on this idea?
Oh, this is a good one, Ham. Oh, it's so hard to say. If they are top 10 in 3-point shooting, like I just said, they are going to be right there in offense. Yeah. Defense, it's difficult. Like the defense is clearly good. But you factor in second chance points, offensive rebounds. You know what? Let's buck the trend. I'm going niff in. Give me top 10 in both offense and defense. It's probably going to be right there around 10 for both of them. But give me they sneak into that top third of the league in both. I like that.
Yeah, and the offense, I mean, they're there right now. And, there's a number of factors that could, move that a little bit. The defense is not, and some of that is because there's 3 games this season where they've given up 120 points or more, including that Golden State game where they gave up 141. So that's going to tilt things. I do think that there is a lot of upward mobility when it comes to their defensive rating. And, this Thunder team has been a top 5 offense and defense before. That's when the team is truly elite. But if they can start creeping into the top 10 in both categories, that's when you really know, I think, that this team is making the moves that we anticipate they're going to make.
Definitely.
All right. For the last one here, Jacob, are you niff in or niff out on the idea that OKC will be a top 6 team in the West at the end of the season?
You know what, Ham? I think I am now firmly in the niff in category here. Again, 10-game sample is small, but some of the projections we had going into the season, we're already seeing those trends being shifted around. Like, I don't know what Memphis does. Like, if this thing is off the rails enough by 25 games when Ja comes back, what do they do? Shout out James Harden for coming into the Clippers and just completely tanking that mess. Making that Clippers unprotected first-round pick the Thunder own look juicier and juicier by the moment. Houston has been good so far. I don't think that's sustainable. They've also played the weakest schedule in the NBA and have gone up against a lot of teams that have had injuries. I don't think Houston can sustain that much. I think 6 is probably where I would slate the Thunder right now. Bypassing that play-in tournament. That would be, you want to talk about making the next logical step forward, that would be a big one. And to go into a 6-3 matchup, maybe you're playing the Lakers, maybe you're playing the Kings, maybe you're maybe Phoenix, although I have worries about them after watching them last night. Nurkic moves about the same speed as my grandmother. Shout out to my grandma. I think there is a clear number 1 team in the West, and I think everything else is up for grabs. Like, nobody has separated themselves in the West besides the Denver. I mean, Dallas is playing fine, but it's the Denver Nuggets conference right now, and everyone else is kind of playing for second place. So why can't the Thunder get to 6?
Yeah, they could definitely play themselves into that because there's a lot of teams that still need to consistently declare themselves throughout the season. Like you said, Dallas is off to a really nice start. but like, we'll check back and see. And there's some of these more veteran teams. This is the cycle of the NBA. Father Time is undefeated, and some young teams are going to push their way up, and some of the older teams are going to start to fade a little bit. And we saw that a little bit last season, and I think it could continue on this year. So the Thunder are in that mix, and they, based on what I've seen so far, and taking into account the hot shooting early and some of the other things that you need to be leery of, I just see a team that's pretty capable. And I see a coach in Mark Daigneault that I think, not that development is completely out the window at this point, but I do think there is more of an emphasis on, we're running lineups out there that are going to give us the best chance to win. And a little bit less on, we're going to let this kid play through it for a few more plays and see what happens. I think there's a little bit of a different mentality, or maybe a little shift in the priorities this year, and that could be something that works in OKC's favor by the end of the season.
Totally agree. It's going to be an exciting year.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been exciting so far. It's going to just keep ramping up from here when they play San Antonio. They go on the road to play Golden State a couple of times, and the schedule just keeps marching on and on. Jacob, thanks so much for joining me today. Any other information? How can people get a hold of you? How can they reach you? How can they find your work? Go ahead, and I did the introduction. You can do it better than I can.
Yeah, if you are interested in checking out our podcast, The Uncontested, we are on all podcast platforms. You can also watch our live streams on YouTube. I am on Twitter at Jacob Kniffen. That's Kniffen. If you're interested in some basketball and random video game and Lord of the Rings tweets, I'm your guy. Ham, it's always a pleasure, man. To get the invite from the Podfather is a privilege, and so I super appreciate you bringing me on.
Well, glad you carved out time for me. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of the season. And for all of you that watch, thank you for taking some time and listening to what we have to say today. So remember, if you like this, hit the like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment. We'll follow along. We'll pop up your comments later on as we go out through the season. This is still a work in progress. We're still building this thing. So appreciate all the support that we've gotten so far, and anything else you can offer is helpful as well. Take care, everyone. We will see you next week.
2, 1. Here we go!